Greetings, I'm back. I had a little bit of water to wet my whistle, and I'm ready to crank up the next one. Fun. Get that. I'm pointing at you with my finger off the screen. The fun never ends unless you let it. I'm serious. Fun never ends unless you let it. Don't let it. Serious academics with a sense of humor. You'll get the flip side of the sense of humor before long. Every once in a while I lapse into Cajun too. I'm trying to think, have I ever done that on a video? Exaggeration! Anyway. Alright, so I'm having a little bit of fun. Put a smile on your face before we get into more of this moment of truth stuff. Right? You must scrutinize those graphs when you see one. Orient yourself. Another Cajun. Orientation. Okay? That's all the Cajun I know is the T-I-O-N word, so don't test me, please. I had somebody do that one time. Somebody that actually was from southern Louisiana. Yeah, it's not Louisiana, it's Louisiana. Oh well, fun never ends unless you let it. Frank Ernest Merrifield is what I call myself when I'm really serious, as opposed to John Merrifield, which is my actual name. Doc to you, or John if you prefer. All right, so here we have the other side of the market, the producers. Don't think cheaper, they sell more, and yeah, that's the demand side. Don't that'll confuse you. Don't get your wires crossed. See these lines? They look like wires, and we do cross them, but don't get them crossed in your brain. Demand and supply are about different sets of people, right? Buyers, that's the demand line describes them. Typically a straight line. I said typically. I don't know that because that means I'd have to know about all the demand lines that have ever. We will draw them as straight lines for this course. Okay, but sometimes in the real world they are curved. Okay, so supply line, same thing. We will draw them straight, although they aren't always. Demand line was a reflection of incremental or marginal benefit. Remember that MB alphabet soup? MPB, marginal private benefit, marginal social benefit, MSB, and alphabet soup. Here it comes. Be ready. I'm trying to overwhelm you a little bit, because I want you to give up now this denial thing about, no, I really don't have to do all this boring stuff about getting into these graphs and, putting points on them and figuring out what they mean and saying in words what numbers mean. Yes, you do. Okay? Because there's a lot of, and you're not going to keep the alphabet straight, much less, as one student recently said who was crying in my office. That's one of the motivations of this video. I like office visits, but when they end up in crying, that's kind of a bummer. This was somebody, it was the fall semester. It was late November and they were struggling. And what I did to kind of confront them with the reason for struggling, because they had been working hard, they said, and I don't doubt them. They were studying, and still, at D's and F's on exams and such. And so I put a blank sheet of paper in front of them and I randomly picked a chapter and I said, tell me the externality story. And I know you know what that means yet, but it was one of the chapters in the book. And it required a demand and supply line, or sometimes they look the same as a marginal analysis graph. Whatever. I said, here. They drew this blank look on their face. They had no idea. They had no idea that P is on the y-axis of a supply and demand graph, because I asked them to draw a supply and demand graph and to label the y-axis and label the x-axis. They had no idea that Q in tons or some unit of measure like gallons or cubic feet per some increment of time like day or week or year is on the x side. They had no idea. They all semester long. This is November in a fall semester. So we're talking, 3 months into the semester. They had no idea, right? Because they had not drawn their first demand graph, even though they had seen one since typically it was a different book I was using then. It was like ours. Chapter 3, in principles course, it's typically chapter 3 that gets into supply and demand. Somehow they had done their denial in Africa, it's just a river in Africa thing and said, nah, I'll just memorize all this stuff. That's what's gotten me this far in high school, and most of my college professors just test me on what I can memorize, and so by golly, that rascal Merrifield, he's probably the same, even though he keeps telling me he's not. And by the way, I'm your friend because I'm not. I actually want to teach you something. I actually want you to learn something in my class. I want a good evaluation from you. That matters to my pocketbook. But I want to earn it the right way. I want you to leave saying you learned something, not just you felt good and you got an A. I want you to get an A, but for the right reason, because you learned a lot. All right, so let's make sure we do that. And again, the fun doesn't end unless you let it, so don't let it. All right, so here's our demand line. Oh, we just did that video. Supply line. Supply line is about sellers. And how do sellers decide whether to supply another unit of something or not? They look at how their costs change, right? So let's just say, before I throw the graph up here, let's say that the price is 15, just like it was on the last graph, and by golly, there it is on this graph. Okay, so the buyer's looking at being able to sell the product for $15. If making one more than they've already made will cost them $15.01, will they do it? Unless it's some sort of a loss leader thing. Well, okay, if I sell it at a penny loss, they'll come into my store and they'll buy some other stuff and I'll make money on that. Forget about that for now. I mean, those kind of complications. By the way, if you're an older student, these are the kinds of things that trip you up. You've been to the school of hard knocks, and I don't know whether, you haven't done any college before and now you're coming back. The school of hard knocks can trip you up in a principles course. Yeah, that school of hard knocks is going to be really valuable for you after you build up a foundation of academic knowledge and how things are connected, right? And you'll realize all those things, those specific facts you know about, this will put them together for you. And you'll have a lot of those aha moments. But it'll also possibly, I see this all the time, trip you up. Oh, well, Doc, what about this and this and this? And I have to tell them, well, we've assumed that away for a principles course to keep things simple. Oh, okay, all right, that's tough. Okay, so try hard. Some of you will do better grade-wise in the more advanced courses. It's only funny because it's ironic. It's just weird. Because by then, you don't have to assume away as many things to keep them simple, to focus on key principles, and that's what this course is about, is learning those key principles. All right, so what's our practicing to be a professional due diligence with any graph? Here it is. Okay, so what are you going to do with it? You're going to pick some points. You're going to say in words what the combination of numbers means, right? Every point in the graph relates to numbers, right? The axis number to the y-axis number. And also, you're going to think about the slope of the line. What does it mean, right? This line slopes upward, right? It's the rate at which the quantity supplied goes up when the amount that it could be sold for, the price that it could be sold for, increases. Right? So it's the rate at which cost per unit rises, right? That's that example again. Okay, suppose you can sell it for $15. If you can produce it, another one, for anything less than 15, you do it, right? Did you hear that click on the microphone there? I meant to make a little click there. Okay, so let's say that making one more than you've already made will cost you $14.99. Well, that's barely worth it, but it is worth it. Right? What if it cost you exactly $15 to make another? You still would, right? Because it's just sort of an advance the concept for later in the course. See, when economists talk about cost, they include all costs. Duh. Well, what do we mean by all costs? Including implicit costs, opportunities foregone that cost you money. Right? So when you're in business, a cost that's real but is only implicit is you could be doing something else. Okay? Or your money could be that you used to start the business could be in the bank earning interest. All of those are taken into account in the cost. So if you have a $15 price you're selling at, and it would cost another $15 in cost, as economics professors and others see it. It's the rational way to see costs to make good decisions. Would add another 15 to your costs, all costs, including implicit costs and costs foregone. You do it, right? Because you're getting a normal rate of return on all your resources, including your time. And so that's fine. And it better be fine because most businesses are in very competitive environments, and a normal rate of return on their resources, sort of a break-even proposition, is the best that they can do. So let's say they're going home, their bills are paid, they're feeding their families, but they're not celebrating having started a business because they're not doing any better in their business than they would be if they were doing whatever else they would be doing. So remember, that's what opportunity cost means. It's what you would otherwise be doing and what that's worth. You're giving that what else you would otherwise be doing. By giving that up, you incur a cost, right? And for a lot of people in business, that's the main cost, is they just gave up their salary that they were paid in a job, right, to be their own boss in a business. All right, so here's this graph that I've been flashing back and forth. And let me kind of orient myself here. Oops, there we go. I got myself on the right side of the graph here again. Okay, so it's kind of like that other graph. I used the same Y and X axis and even the same price. But now we're talking quantity supplied, so the amount supplied is different. And you see there, I added kind of at the last minute, see down at the bottom here where it says 40, okay, and then up here where it says 8. I pointed at exactly the right place, even though it's kind of a mirror thing here. Okay, so let's, since I said pick 2 points, I'm going to go even beyond that. Let's pick 3, right? So 1 point is that one, next one is that one, and then the other one is that one. Okay, we're going to interpret those 3 points to ground ourselves orientational on this graph. All right, so 5, what does that mean down there where it says 5? Okay, that's the lowest per unit opportunity cost of any seller of concrete out there. Right, if the price of concrete were anything less than $5, actually $5.01, call it $5. Anything less than that, there would be no concrete made available, because the lowest cost producer has a $5 opportunity cost to produce the first ton of concrete. Okay, and if the price went down to just a tad over 5, the amount produced would be 1. Okay, that person out there, is it sounding familiar? That has that low opportunity cost is now selling, let's say they're selling at 15. We're pretty happy, right? You have a $5 opportunity cost to make the concrete, they're getting 15 for it. A $10 gain from trade, right? Are you getting the idea of the triangle again? Yeah. There's a producer surplus triangle here. Price minus supply, right? The last unit sold, which if the price was 15, the last unit produced and sold would be the 130th one, right? Because the 130th one adds $15 to total cost, right? Change in total cost, marginal cost. Marginal cost for the 130th one, the change in total cost, is $15. That's why they'll sell 130, but not 131, because the 131st one, right, the supply line is above $15 at that point, has an opportunity cost of more than 15. It's irrational, again, other than if you have a multi-product firm and you're doing loss leader advertising, it's irrational to produce something at an incremental cost of $15.01 when you're going to sell it for 15. Just makes sense. All right, but up to the 130th one, the $15 more than covers the opportunity cost incurred to produce the product. And again, unless we want to add 130 different differences between price of 15 and what the opportunity cost is as we go from 0 to 130, unless we want to do that, which is really tedious, to do 130 subtractions and then 130 additions. Just take the area of this triangle. The one side is 10, 15, not this 10, 15 minus 5, right? That's how long one side of the triangle is. Doesn't matter if you call it the base of the height. The other side of the triangle is, right, this dotted line goes from 0 to 130, so it's 130 tons per day long, right? 130 tons per day long. And so 10, 15 minus 5, times that, and again, I'll have a sheet for you that'll write that down, but taking notes engraves it on your brain, so I'll go ahead and write it down now. I'm getting into the Cajun thing, doggone it. Write it down now, and I will provide it for you later on. Orientation. There it goes again, right? It'll engrave it in your brain, and then when you, oh, I'm sorry, I lost track a minute there. Orientation, that's the one that I said on the previous video. In this case, you'll write it down, 10 times 130, you can do that in your head, right? 1,300. It's a triangle, right? Because half the gain from trade, the average gain from trade for the sellers isn't the 15 minus 10, that's the maximum. The average is half of that, right? 15 minus 5 is 10, and then The minimum gain from trade is 0, so the average of 10 and 0 is 5. So 15 minus 5 times 130, which is 1,300, divided by 2 is 650. That's the producer surplus, and the Cajun word is verification, right? So you'll write this down now based on my words, and then I'll put the sheet up here in a minute. There it is for just a second. You can freeze it and go back, but don't. I'll hold it up there again in a minute for a longer. Right, so you can verification of what was said here. And one of the nice things about that is when you go through it the first time, you can stop the video, go sit at a different desk for a minute. You know, look at my mug frozen because I might have a bad look in my face where you click it off. That's a turn off. Do that. Go to another desk or face the other way or something. Do the math that you think you need to do to get the economic concept. By the way, that's how I typically test things. I'm not into testing your skill at memorization. It's not going to be any test questions on that. Well, I better not say they won't. There probably won't be any. I have to be somewhat of a slave of the test bank. But typically, in addition to any that I typically avoid, to just ask you to memorize a definition, in case there are some of those that I pick. Typically, in addition to those, there are go find the producer surplus. Okay, and you'll be provided the graph within a price supply line. Okay, if you don't know what a producer surplus is, you won't be able to do the minimal math to do it. If you know what it is, 15 minus 5 on the one side, 130 on the other side, and you'll get 650 tons per day, right? If you do dollars per ton, right, the 15 minus 5 is dollars per ton, and the 130 is, moved the wrong hand again. 130 is in tons per day. Write that on a piece of paper, and is it on my other piece of paper? No, I didn't write it all the way out. I should have. Write that on a piece of paper. 15 minus 5 dollars per ton times 130 tons per day, and you'll see that the tons cancel out. It's the denominator for the 15 minus 5. It's the numerator for the 130. They'll just cancel out. So your consumer surplus on the last video and your producer surplus on this one is in dollars per day gain from trade, in this case, to the sellers. The sellers will be better off by $650 per day for having an opportunity to sell concrete for $15 a ton. Right? That's the maximum gain from trade for sellers at $15 a ton. If they produce more than $15 a ton, they produce more than 130, at $15 a ton, they'll make less gain from trade than $650. If they produce less than 130 or more than 130, doesn't matter. Their gain from trade, producer surplus, difference between price and supply, will be less than 130. I guess you could say, well, 129 would yield the same amount, right? Because remember, the 130th one has an incremental cost exactly equal to 15. All right. But remember, it's still worth producing because it covers all opportunity costs, not just the explicit expenses that you report to the IRS. Right? Don't be reporting implicit opportunity costs to the IRS if you have a business. They'll say, receipts, show me receipts. Explicit costs can be documented by receipts. Implicit costs are only up here in your head where you say, darn it, if I weren't doing this job, I'd be making $70,000 a year doing, whatever. And so I better clear at least $70,000 after expenses to break even in this job, in this business. You see what I mean by break even? You're making, let's say, made exactly $70,000 after expenses. That's not a real profit. I mean, it's one you better report to the IRS and pay taxes on, but it's not a profit in any sense that you made money over what you would otherwise be doing. Okay? Of course, you're paying taxes on the $70,000 salary too. See, is the capital gains rate lower? Well, you see why some people go into business as opposed to their old job. They figure they can clear the same amount, but taxes are different. Okay? I'm not good enough with tax law to recall. I think it's lower. Capital gains rate's lower, right? So if you can make $70,000 left over after expenses, it'd be better than making $70,000 job with a $70,000 salary for a job. All right, so we did the 5, right? Okay, and then let's just do the this next point here. The coordinates are x is 40, right? That little 40 down there. Can you see that 40? Okay. X is 40, y is 8, right? So that says if the price is 8, the quantity supplied will be 40. the 40th unit of concrete per day. I moved the right hand this time. The 40th ton per day has an opportunity cost of $8 per ton. Right? You can see there's a little 8 there. Yeah, I didn't have a marker when I decided to make this addition. Sorry. Okay, and then moving up the line, the 130th one has a marginal cost or marginal opportunity cost of $15 per ton. Okay, the 130th one. By making 130 rather than 129, you incurred an additional $15 worth of cost. See, if you get that into your head, then you'll know why the amount supplied is determined by putting a price on the graph and going over the supply line and going down and seeing the quantity. That's all there is to it. All right, I'm going to take a look at my notes to make sure I covered everything for the Moment of Truth supply video. And then I'm going to put up that little sheet of paper that I promised for verification. Right, so that if you can make sure that you took good notes, and if you didn't, you can correct them. All right. All right, so there it is. It's a little smaller, so oops, get my head around the right side of it. It's a little smaller than the graph. Price of $15 per ton. The amount produced will be 130, at which the marginal cost, which is the change in the total cost, right, for change in quantity, will be equal to 15, right? And I put the 130 up there one more time. We can read that. It was in pen, not marker. Producer surplus is price minus supply. Okay, and the price in this case was 15. The opportunity cost or minimum marginal cost, if I can point to that, there it is, backwards. Okay, is 5, right? What was the 5? That was the where the supply line started. The minimum marginal cost or minimum opportunity cost. Okay, so and so the one side of the triangle is 15 minus 5. The other side is the 130 divided by 2, and punch that out on your calculator for further verification, and you'll get $650 per day. All right, that'll wrap up the producer surplus Moment of Truth supply video. I'm going to do one more. You can watch it now or watch it in a couple minutes or later.